Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and this is what's happening in this episode. Last week, we spoke with Andre Dubose. It was part one of our very dynamic conversation. And as promised, this week you get part two, where we go into detail about some of the things we touched on and more. In this episode, we talk about what it really looks like when you're making those transitions from pharma to medical device. We talk about the importance of mentors when you're developing and moving on in your career. We even get into what it really means and how to carry yourself as a medical device sales rep in the OR. You know, how to really be that general manager of the operating room. And we get to some other things too that I believe you're going to find really interesting. So again, thank you so much for listening and enjoy this episode.
I'm open to hiring those types of people if they have the right mindset and the right pedigree.
Now, do you think in general, the direction is moving towards everyone's an individual? There's amazing pharma reps out there that can get into devices, or do you think in general that stigma is still where it was, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago?
I think it's evolving. I think it's also because of the way that we're interacting with customers, because there's so many, like I said, so many medical device positions that have a significant office-based component.
Got it.
Right?
Got it. Yeah.
And if you're able to, I think the biggest part of the stigma is, related to how you're self-motivated. How are you deviating from a script in order to really grow your business?
Make things happen.
How are you able to go into an environment where you don't have, there's no product catalog or a brochure that says, these are the 5 things that you should tell this person about this product and contraindications. And you have this message X number of times per day, and you're going to have a certain level of success.
Right.
No, how many thousands of products do I have, or does my team have?
Right.
They have a hospital that they have to figure out how to kind of penetrate this ecosystem and establish themselves with trust. And to do it with, they have to understand anatomy. They also have to understand the actual procedure that's being done in those situations. So yeah, there's some dynamics that make it more complex, but there are some fundamentals that allow for a lot of people to transfer those skill sets into success in the medical device space.
So then would you say, if you're, I'm gonna throw in college grad, let's even say master's degree grad, or you're someone coming from a different industry, and you feel it's important to get into pharma before you get devices because your first initial push for devices, no one's entertaining it. Do you recommend that as a good idea or not?
I think it really depends on what their goal is, right? Because when I went into pharmaceutical sales to medical devices, I took a pay cut, right? So it really depends on where you are in your life and what you're willing to do. In medical devices, my first job as a sales associate, I didn't have a territory, and I pretty much had to run and jump as fast and as far as someone else told me to. So, everyone's not going to be willing to, in some cases, take that financial step back to be someone's apprentice for 2 years. And so I think if your mindset is, I want to come in so I can establish myself and learn how to articulate, clinical messages to physicians, how I can, build a business in a territory, find success, then I think it's completely applicable. And if you're also at the same time continuing to understand the nuances of whatever medical device space that you're interested in, and you can articulate how all those things you're doing are precursory to your success in medical devices, oh, game over. But it becomes really challenging for people to do that. And then some people, they get in pharmaceuticals and they're like, man, this money's good. This lifestyle is good. And
Right.
maybe they don't necessarily get to the same levels of earnings or the types of spaces that they operate in on a daily basis, but maybe they find that that's really good for them where
Yeah,
they are.
it's a good niche for them. Right.
Yeah, because I mean, everybody. I mean, I was single, and I was in a position where I was interested in it, and I could actually pursue it. And I also had to relocate, so that's what got me from the Philadelphia area down to Baltimore. Is when I started that opportunity as a sales associate with Medtronic.
So you would never advise someone you need to get into pharmaceutical sales before you continue going after medical devices. That would not be your advice.
I'd say network. Find people who are at medical device companies that you might not necessarily they might not have an opening, but you just get to learn what they're talking about.
Just know what they're talking about.
Three brothers that just sowed so many seeds into me, Mike Pitts, Dave Harris, Ben Barnes.
Okay.
They gave me the blueprint, and no disrespect to anybody who I miss, James Bryson and Jermaine.
You're gonna get calls now.
And Karan Johnson, that's it. That's all my shout outs. But those three brothers, I didn't even know them. They saw me, they knew, they could just tell by my posture and my energy that I was like on the hunt looking for an opportunity. And they started saying, hey man, what's going on? What's up with you? And I'm like, got an interview with Medtronic, just trying to make sure I'm all good. And then an hour and a half later, they're just sowing continual seeds in me as far as how to talk, how to close, certain things to really be cognizant of. And I say, without a shadow of a doubt, and every time I see them, I tell them this, if it wasn't for them and the guidance that they offered me, when I sat down with my VP at the time, I would not have been mentally prepared. And as a result, my first interview with Medtronic in 2004 was like, hey, you know what? Some things you might want to work on are X, Y, Z. My interview in 2007, I knew 25 people at the company. End of my interviews, people were coming up like, hey, Andre, so how'd you do? Like I already had this family team, and especially because there's not a lot of us in the space, there was even more of a willingness and interest in saying, how can I help this brother get in? Because he's clearly done the work and he's clearly prepared. That's good. So, I was fortunate and blessed to have those people, kind of present themselves as the leaders that they are.
So good. So good. Okay. So you're in Medtronic, and I'm sure you're just the happiest guy on earth for that moment. And you were there for 8 years. I mean, you put in some time at Medtronic. So I'm sure you established quite a base of support and quite of understanding for actual medical devices in the field you were in. Tell us a little bit about that. What field were you in? And what was it like from your first few years to your last few years there?
So I'll say I didn't find spine found me. So I applied for a role and it just happened to be within spine. And so I started off as an associate sales rep. I was working for a guy who was a former West Point grad. And so he called me at 6 o'clock in the morning and we get off the phone. I looked and it was like 6:15, like clockwork, it's like he was just that regimented and that structured, but it takes that type of drive, and he would be super efficient in the way that he kind of laid out what we needed to do in order to be successful for the day. And so I felt like I had a great training ground to learn, and especially in Baltimore where some of the, best hospitals are in the country. So I was working in spine in that space. I did that for about 18 months. He really prepared me for how to manage a territory on my own. And so he got promoted to a manager. And as a result, I was able to assume his territory. And the first 2 or 3 months was awesome. It's like my compensation got a lot stronger. But I had my fair share of challenges. It's like all of a sudden you're on stage and the lights go on and they say action. And you got to make sure that you're ready. And it's not something that everyone can just take on immediately. And for people who want to transition immediately into a sales rep position, that comes, it's very far and few between, especially without some of that experience. But, you have to be prepared for the world once you get that opportunity. And so I had my fair share of challenges just like anyone else. But about 4 months into it, my number one physician passed away.
Mm.
And, at that point, I'm no longer on a salary. I'm commission only.
Mm.
And I'm trying to figure out how am I going to, how am I going to survive? And so I had to
Wow.
literally build my business up from nothing.
Wow.
And I got opportunities that were offered to me from other companies because people saw like I had been in the same facilities for 2 years almost.
Yep.
People were like, man, like, hey, we feel terrible for you. We can offer you a job, and it would be as a glorified sales associate again. And I said to myself, at some point, I'm going to face a challenge in life that I'm just going to have to tackle. And career wise, I hadn't faced something like that. And I'm like, I could either take this carrot that's being dangled in front of me, or I could just double down on myself and say, you know what, let me just go ahead and figure this out. Let me just see if I can use the brand that I've established, the great products that I have, and the hustle that's within me,
Mm.
and get this territory up to something that I can at least pay my rent with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so over the course of the next couple of years, just little by little, stacking up crumbs, in order to have enough to survive on. And I got higher levels of success being that person that was ready. I would do removal cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go to surgeons and say, I'm the same guy that's there for you, whether it's a deposit or withdrawal. I'm
Yeah.
going to just give you the same service, the same support. And
Yeah.
eventually people respected what I was doing. So I got successful. I started growing my business pretty significantly in my last quarter. I was probably on a run rate of about $4 million per year
Nice.
territory.
Nice.
And I was pretty much doing that by myself. I had a little bit of help, but for the most part, running that solo.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I love it. That's beautiful.
I mean,
Okay.
I was very lucky though. I was very lucky that, people took a chance on me. I was very lucky that my brand was strong, and that I had taken all those lessons and all those seeds that were sowed in me and just said, all right, now it's time to truly apply it.
So then how long did that take you? You said you really had to just build the business from the ground up. Was that a number of years into the end of your time with Medtronic? Was that halfway between?
That was probably somewhere around 2009, 2010. So it probably took me about 2 years to get things like where it was like, yo, it's on now. And so during that time, I just started identifying different products and different ways to, infiltrate facilities. And so there was one little product, and I started, having some conversations with a customer. And a lot of folks that have been in medical device can appreciate this, is they don't necessarily always want to talk about new products until they're tried and tested and true. And they don't want to create disruption like that.
Right.
They want to, just make sure that they know that there's not going to be any issue. And I'm like, I'm not in a position where I can do that. I got to sell all the new stuff. I have to embrace technology. It's exciting for me. And so I started selling things that other people weren't and finding these little niches. And I'm like, if I can find a niche that gives me a reason to be in the room, and if I have a reason to be in the room, then I can brand myself. And if I can brand myself and I got decent other products, then eventually either one or two things is going to happen. Somebody's going to drop the ball, one of my competitors, and I'm going to be like, oh, I got my stuff here. Or eventually someone says, you know what? I like the energy in the room when Andre's in. Mm-hmm. And so for medical device folks, especially in the OR, it's all about the energy that you bring into that space, how you manage the operating room. Yeah. You're basically the general manager, because who else is going to be in there from the very beginning of the surgery to the very end? Nurses come and go. Scrub techs going to get relieved. Anesthesiologists going to go on break. If they're lucky enough to have a PA, they might have to go up and, see somebody, do a consult or something like that. The only person that's there from the very beginning to the very end is the surgeon, the patient, and you. So how do you create that environment and that vibe? Yeah. I still got playlists on my Pandora from surgeons I used to work with up in Baltimore, because I got to make sure I got the right vibe, right?
Wow. That's so interesting. I mean, that puts a lot of pressure on the sales rep, for you to be one of the factors into making sure the energy is right. And then really your entire career is based on how well you can establish that on a consistent basis.
Man, listen, somebody can cut you off in traffic on your way somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I don't care where you're going. You can be going somewhere super fun.
Sure.
Going to the airport to go on vacation.
Yeah.
Somebody cut you off in traffic or taking the parking spot in the garage.
Mad as all hell.
You're walking through that concourse still mad, right?
Yep.
And then let them change your gate, right? So now you got to go from A terminal to B terminal. Now it just starts to snowball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
OR is the same way. You know, the sensitivity around, I mean, listen, it's a theater. It's a suite for them to focus on doing the most important thing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make sure that you preserve the integrity of that sanctuary for them so that they can do what they do best in the environment that they need it to be. And so, I mean, I'm not an expert in it, but one thing I realized is that certain surgeons were in better moods when the temperature was right and the music that they wanted to hear was playing.
Yeah.
And so if too many people were talking in the background, I might lean back like, can we he's decompressing right now. You might want to dial it down a little bit.
Right. Look at that. You are really, you're just establishing yourself as a true asset, a resource in every way of the word. And like you said, you become very highly valued in your territory. And that's when things start happening and you really start growing the business.
Yeah. So that's why I got tapped. Part of the reason why I got tapped on the shoulder to lead a team.
Okay.
After some success and President's Club and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I got an opportunity to lead a team in a slightly different division.
Okay.
And I relocated from, Baltimore, continued to move down south to Atlanta, and I managed 4 states with about 17 people in that position.
Okay. And that was with Medtronic?
That was still with Medtronic, yes.
Okay. So then why did you, Medtronic is an amazing company. Why did you leave Medtronic?
Absolutely. So, great experience, and great opportunities there. There was a reorganization and, I was being offered a number of roles. So I could have continued my career there. But, my wife was pregnant. We were building a house and we had just moved the year prior. And the idea of me going into my wife, into the room with my wife and saying, hey, so how about New Orleans?
Got it.
Like, I just was
nah,
the timing was not optimal.
Sure.
And then, but also the types of roles that at that point in my career, I was really interested in.
Sure.
Started to shift. And again, intellectual curiosity, wanting to find ways to help other people, really start enjoying leadership, wanting to help other people find success. And so, during that time, I started having conversations with folks, and there was a gentleman who I was in initial training with at Medtronic, who was at NuVasive. And, he was someone who I respected tremendously. Mm-hmm. And he just started talking about how cool his role was, how cool the company was, the technologies in particular. And, innovation is always something that's driving a lot of the decisions that I make and the culture of the organization. So, when he started talking about the technology that they had and the procedures and the approach to engaging customers being very different than, hey, oh, you want a screw? We got screws. It was like, hey, we're going to talk to you about a procedure of how you can actually use these and maximize the outcome for a patient. I'm like, so I started interviewing for a market development position in the Southeast. And I took that on. I was really excited about that because it gave me a big geography. Mm-hmm. It gave me the opportunity to brand myself in a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. And I think, more importantly, that position, we were pretty much the tip of the spear from a clinical perspective. So it allowed for me to really dive into my chops of, understanding clinical literature and how to articulate it and how to walk someone on this journey from doing procedures one way to doing things totally different. Gotcha. So I felt like that was a position that had some gravitas and some juice in the organization. Yeah. And it's a fraternity, if you will, because there's a long lineage of those individuals within the company and even thereafter.
Yeah. And then here you are at NuVasive.
Well, look, fortunate and blessed. I'll say it over and over. I've been very blessed with the opportunities that have been presented before me, and I don't take it lightly. And and the only thing I can do in order to feel like I'm somewhat paying it back is by paying it forward and by having conversations about how other people can do it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So in your role in NuVasive, tell us a little bit about what leadership looks like. We've talked about it before. You make hiring decisions. That's for your team, right? So tell us what that looks like and just maybe the top 2 or 3 things you especially look for when you're looking to bring someone onto your team?
Well, I'll tell you, some of the things I look for is people that have hustle, people that have drive,
Mm-hmm.
people that have something that they're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't, every conversation doesn't have to be, related to what they've done in their careers,
Sure.
right? It's life. I'm sure somebody, I think one of my reps just texted me a second ago, right? We're East Coast time, and it's not morning,
Right.
but it's, do you have the drive? Do you have the passion to be successful and to help people in this space?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to fuel you more than what you get paid. You only get you get paid a lot less than you have to kind of go to the bank of equity and energy and hustle and
Sweat
drive.
equity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's something that you have to do on a daily basis. And so
Mm-hmm.
I look for people who have those characteristics. I also think about people who are memorable and likable.
Sure.
If you're going to spend 8 hours in a surgery with a surgeon, you have to be able to have the IQ and the EQ, of course, but you also have to be likable so that they say, what, the case went well. I enjoy having so-and-so in the room.
Got it.
And whether they acknowledge you or not, they hear, they know what's going on.
Got it.
So those are some of the things I think are extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just passion, like if you're passionate about something, it comes across and then people get attracted to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It shows. I'm
Yeah.
sure in the interview process too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I also say that in spine in particular, there's always going to be a desire to have people who have some OR experience, because there are a number of factors that can create some challenges for people when they're transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you have to understand the surgical procedure.
Mm-hmm.
You got to understand the anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
Then you also have to understand the products that you have. And in many cases, you'll have surgeons like, I know your stuff better than you do. And well, you probably
Yeah,
do.
you're kind of right.
Right. So how do you then in that space brand
Sure.
yourself, and then also how do you ensure that you're understanding and learning all those nuanced things that could potentially be asked.
Okay.
So you got to be able to walk and chew gum, and people who are dynamic also, I think, are those that I pay attention to. The person who can hear what's going on in our conversation,
Yeah.
while hearing what's going on in another
Yeah.
conversation,
Yeah.
and be able to manage those dynamics. Some of those unspoken things, but ultimately it's people who are just dynamic.
Got it. That's important. All right. So then for the future, what do you see in the next, I don't know, 5 years out? Where would you like to be if it was a perfect world and anything you have, you can have it? Where would it be?
Heading to the airport without somebody cutting me off in traffic, without somebody changing my gate, and heading to somewhere. It seems like it's going to be a while. It seems like it's going to be a while before we can be in that position. Heading to a place that's hot with no mosquitoes, right?
Right.
So that's personally, but professionally, who knows? I think there are certain things that are key functions of my role and responsibility that I've come to appreciate and love, and that are part of my why and my true north. And that's, helping other people become better versions of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
Helping other people understand how to be good leaders and be good stewards of the organization, to help the organization reflect the world that we exist in, more so than they currently do. How do I take my position within the organization and create some scale and some dynamic where it'll exist even if I'm not here. Right. I've fortunately been in different leadership positions where I've helped partner with, women in spine, and with diversity and equity and inclusion, and, trying to make sure that those individuals who don't get opportunities traditionally now have a voice, and now get a chance to have a seat at the table, and now get a chance to let those talents shine, so that organizations can continue to grow and find success by having a more diverse workforce. Taking individuals who are skilled and talented, but have a tough set of circumstances, and helping to make sure that they're thinking about their business in a strategic way, so that they can actually achieve success that I know that they're capable of. The things that I'm most excited by is when I see on LinkedIn or in text messages or things like that, when people reach back and say like, yeah, I just won President's Club again, or I just did, I just, hit this particular quota, or I had this level of success, when I knew that they had it within them, but their current circumstances, didn't illustrate that that was going to be the reality for them. And so anytime I have an opportunity to help people become a better version of themselves, I'm always down for the cause. And to be able to do it in a space like healthcare, where that throughout that entire process, helping to change the dynamics of people's lives, all over your area, that's the win-win.
So
money will come, success will come, trophies will come if you do all those things the right way every time.
So well said. All right, last two questions. First one being, if you could go back to, let's take it back to right before cord blood registry.
Okay.
Right after Johnson & Johnson, you can give yourself a piece of advice for the rest of your career. Something that you know now, of course you didn't know back then. What would that piece be?
Stack cheddar. Stack your money.
Oh,
stack your money.
That is the title of this episode. That's going to be the title of this episode.
Well, listen, look, I'm 100%. Look, I can tell you, I've had so many conversations with reps that, just because I covered the especially in this, the role prior to this current one, I covered the entire Southeast. So I spend a lot of time with folks, and I'm like, and I see how successful they are, or how their business is growing. Yeah. But then you see them at like meetings, and I'm like, I'm like, okay, I see you're making a couple dollars. Like, make sure you invest, make sure you save, because you getting a check for $150,000 for closing out a quarter is great, but Uncle Sam's going to get his. Make sure you keep some of yours, right. And don't just spend it, right? So and that maybe that's the old head in me these days that says, save your money. But I also say, like, buy something that, if you're having those types of wins, buy something that you can actually look back at in the future and say, you know what, like, this is a sign of that year I killed it, or that year I won President's Club, I bought a watch. Like, because I was told by another old head, like, you got to have something that you can look back to and say, hey, this is a sign of, a level of success that I achieved, that that I'm proud of. Yeah. And so I say jokingly, but I'm serious, like, manage your money. Got it. Manage your money when you're in those spaces. I think the only other thing that I would say is, just continue to cultivate and nourish those relationships with people with consistency. Whether you're looking for a job, or whether you got a good job or not, like, the more you're able to really cultivate and establish those relationships and continue to invest in them, you'll be a blessing to other people, and people will be a blessing to you. And I see it especially with my wife, because she's extremely good about that and always has been. And, I just see the nature of her relationships and how deeply rooted they are. And it's beautiful. It truly is. Yeah. I think it's, in the hustle to do well and be successful, and you kind of get really, really focused in on your task at hand. And some environments, especially my device environments, have been really intense and highly involved. But don't be so busy that you can't pick up your head and say, let me just make sure I survey the landscape, touch base with people that are important to me, and keep those relationships, because before you know it, you'll be an old head too.
You know what? That you took the last question right out of my mouth with that one. Letting people know that they need to cultivate their relationships. That's so important. That's critical. Even after you get the job, if somebody helps you get the job and you got your network tight and they're all supporting you and you get your role, keep those relationships going.
Well, I always will say it, like, if I help someone out, and I've had people call me literally the night before, and I know who the person who hears this podcast is going to know I'm talking about them. Call me at 10:30, like, I got an interview tomorrow, I need some tips. Yeah. And he's my frat brother, and I love him, so I'm always going to look out for him. But I'm like, really, like 10:30? But when you get those opportunities, or you get that job, or you kill that deal, and you reach a certain level of success, like, make sure that you give those flowers to those people while they can smell them, and say, yo, like, I really appreciate you.
Got it.
It might be Father's Day, it might be the holidays or Christmas, but let people know, like, I appreciate you because you helped me out. Again, putting it in the universe is only going to come back full circle.
Got it. Got it. And with that said, thank you so much, Andre. You serenaded us today, and you dropped a lot of knowledge, and I know everyone listening is truly appreciative of it. Wasn't that a great interview? I mean, gosh, we tackled so many things in that episode. We went over the transitions you make in your career when you're jumping from one field, for example, pharma, to the next, a medical device. We went over what the actual role is when you're a medical device sales rep in the OR. And I would love to hear any of you OR reps that are listening to this podcast. Please visit the website. I would love to hear how you manage the room, how you bring that energy and really create that vibe. Go to evolveyoursuccess.com and click the send a voice message tab and let me know. And we even went over, how to even practice having a certain demeanor when you're doing your job, and especially if you're in the OR. And then lastly, one thing that I can't let go of is, make sure you stack cheddar. I mean, that's straight from Andre's house of terms, and really invest your money. You're making a lot, you're doing well, and this really applies to anyone in medical sales. I mean, so many of these medical sales careers, you do earn very well, and if you're a consistent performer, you're consistently earning, and you want to make some wise investments, and don't think it's always going to be there. Plan for an end so that you're where you need to be when the time comes. Again, it was such a dynamic episode. I loved having Andre on as our guest. He really knows how to express where the value is for someone that wants to be in the industry, where the value needs to be for someone that is in the industry, and even how to think of the future as you continue to develop. As far as the challenge for this week, this was part 2 from last week's part 1. The challenge for this week, I'm going to keep it really simple. I want to hear from you all out there what resonated with you in this episode, and what is something that you would like to be addressed in future episodes. I'm always doing everything I can to make sure you're getting dynamic guests like Andre, and you're getting insights and perspectives that you might have never considered. So feel free to share. Again, you can visit the Send a Voice Message tab on the evolveyoursuccess.com website, or you can even send me an email at samuel@evolveyoursuccess.com. And for those of you that want to get into the industry, you already know where to go. Go to evolveyoursuccess.com, take the assessment, get an idea of what you need to get in, and then you'll be prompted to set up a call with me, and we can talk about what we can do with our program to help you get a position. For those of you that want to increase your performance, you're listening to these episodes and you're thinking, you know what, I want to perform at that level. Again, visit the website, evolveyoursuccess.com, go to the Sales Builder page, schedule some time, and let's have a conversation. Thank you so much for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. Continue to stay tuned for more amazing episodes with more amazing guests, and you will be hearing from me next week. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.